Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 168. Have you been hearing the buzz about the new medication approved for the treatment of fibromyalgia? Today, I am talking with Dr. Seth Lederman, CEO of Tonix Pharmaceuticals, about their new medication, Tonmya. That's Tonmya. We will be talking about Tonmya's FDA approval on August 15th, when patients can be able to get Tonmya and begin using it, how long it takes to see results, potential side effects, and a lot more. This is the first medication approved for fibromyalgia in over 15 years, so this is very exciting. Now, let me introduce you to our guest. Dr. Seth Lederman is a physician, scientist, and entrepreneur, and the founder of Tonix. Prior to Tonix, Dr. Lederman founded Targent Pharmaceuticals, which developed late-stage oncology drugs. Prior to becoming a biopharma entrepreneur, Dr. Lederman served as an associate professor at Columbia University for 2 decades and directed basic science research in molecular immunology, infectious diseases, and the development of therapeutics for autoimmune diseases. In addition to his research, Dr. Lederman served as attending physician in the Edward Daniels Arthritis and Immunity Clinic on the medical service at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital for several years. Dr. Lederman earned his MD from Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons and an AB from Princeton in chemistry cum laude. As you'll hear Dr. Lederman say in our interview, he's been working with fibromyalgia patients for decades, which is partly why he is so excited to share this new medication with us. As always, I want to remind you that the information included in this podcast should never be considered medical advice, nor is it intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician or other healthcare provider. But we do hope that you will share Tonmya with your providers, either through sharing their website or even sharing this podcast episode. We want to get the word out. And make sure you stay tuned after my interview. I have an additional bit of information that Dr. Lederman shared with me after we stopped recording that I know you are going to want to hear. Now, here is my conversation with Dr. Seth Lederman, CEO of Tonix Pharmaceuticals. Hi, Dr. Lederman. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm excited to hear about our new medication.
I'm excited to speak with you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for people who might not have heard our previous conversation, I'd like to start from the beginning and just find out from you, like, what made you want to focus on fibromyalgia? It's been 15 years since our last medication. There's not enough attention to this. So what made you want to focus on fibromyalgia?
Well, I've been working on fibromyalgia for more than 30 years in one way or another. I trained in rheumatology at Columbia Medical School and served on the faculty for a number of years, many of them also attending on the rheumatology service. So I was one of the professionals early on who recognized how common fibromyalgia was and how poorly it was understood. So I've been very involved in trying to do something for fibromyalgia patients for several decades.
Yeah. So why the shift then? Obviously, it's a shift in career too, not just a shift in focus. You went from treating patients to now creating some medication for us. How did that shift happen?
Well, even before I went to medical school, I was involved in research. I was an undergraduate in chemistry, and I've always been involved in research. So at Columbia, in addition to being on the clinical faculty, I had a research lab, an NIH-funded lab, and I worked in immunology. So I've always had an angle in a focus in my career towards developing new therapies. And given my familiarity with fibromyalgia and the belief that we had something important to offer fibromyalgia patients, it's become a focus of my company, the company I co-founded called Tonix, for more than 15 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think it's important to pause here for you listening. There are things happening for fibromyalgia, even if it doesn't always seem like it. Right? So for the last 15 years, we've been working on this and kind of in the background, but that's how long these things take, right?
Exactly. And there's not just a little bit going on in fibromyalgia. There's a lot going on in fibromyalgia. I'm happy to update you, but
Yes.
the just the appreciation of the new third type of pain called nociplastic pain is now
Yes.
widely recognized by the International Association for the Study of Pain. And increasingly, I think doctors, other healthcare professionals are aware of fibromyalgia, and I think that the diagnosis and treatment is improving.
Yes, I would agree with that. I have the opportunity a few times a year to speak with medical students at Oregon Health and Science University, and it's always so encouraging to me to hear their questions and sort of see the way that they're thinking because it is so different than it used to be. So I do find it very encouraging. That's awesome. Yeah. So for people who don't understand, and I would be one of them, what the whole process is for getting a medication approved, can you share just a little bit about everything that you had to go through, all the boxes you had to check, and why the process takes so long?
Sure. So let me just back up and say our company, Tonix Pharmaceuticals, received FDA approval on August 15th for our new medicine to treat fibromyalgia, and it's now called Tonmya, Tonmy, uh,
Yes,
Oh,
Tonmya.
MYA, sorry, Tonmya. Um, and it's cyclobenzaprine HCl sublingual tablets, and it's indicated for the treatment of adults with fibromyalgia. And the dosing instruction for adults is one tablet every night for 2 weeks, and then two tablets every night um, for long-term therapy. And for geriatric patients, it stays at one tablet every night. And the goal of our drug development process was to address non-restorative sleep because I was very much influenced by the work of Dr. Harvey Moldavsky at the University of Toronto. And Harvey was on our scientific advisory board. He's a founding member of our scientific advisory board and supported us for many years. In an ironic circumstance, a sad and ironic circumstance, Dr. Moldavsky passed away on August 15th, the same day that our drug was approved.
Wow.
So but he was 90, and he knew the date was coming, but I don't believe that he opened the email. Anyway, but so Dr. Moldavsky is the one who proposed in 1975, so 50 years ago, that fibromyalgia should be considered a disorder of non-restorative sleep. So he put the non-restorative sleep at the center of fibromyalgia. I'm not sure that all the experts agree with Dr. Moldavsky that it is in the center as much as he believed, but that was the target for us to create a new treatment. And Dr. Moldavsky worked with us to support our clinical trials and other things. So he was very involved in it. But I think that since our goal was to develop a drug that targeted non-restorative sleep, and since we ultimately did studies that showed its activity, I think that our work supports his assertion that non-restorative sleep is very important in fibromyalgia. But that was a background. Now, if I can get back to your question, sorry for that digression. But our drug is taken every night at bedtime, and we had to figure out what the right dose would be. So we did two studies at a lower dose, and then we did the two studies to get approval at this higher dose. Um, and the process for FDA, the statutory requirement for FDA approval is two adequate and well-controlled studies. So in our case, we did two phase 3 studies that showed a benefit of Tonmya over placebo. And then we reported the second of those two studies in December of 2023. We filed the new drug application in October of 2024. In December of 2024, we were awarded what's called a PDUFA date, PDUFA, of August 15th, 2025. And on August 15th, 2025, the FDA sent us a letter informing us that Tonmya was approved.
Wow. It's such a process, right?
Well, FDA approval is hard to get, and it ought to be, because treating people, particularly treating people with chronic pain, is something that has to be tested quite thoroughly to make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks, uh, and and as you know, and as people who listen to this who are interested in fibromyalgia know, fibromyalgia is a very hard thing to study.
Yes, yes, it is. And it's a hard thing to treat too, because there's a lot of factors there, right? I know for me, I can speak to the sleep being in the center of things. That is the one thing I have to protect above all else. If I get good sleep, everything else works better, right? And if I don't get good sleep, that is a recipe for, feeling worse. So for me, I absolutely get that. I don't know if it's the only thing in the center, but I definitely get that. So, how does Tonmya then improve that non-restorative sleep? Does it increase deep sleep? Does it keep us asleep longer? Like, how exactly does it improve that sleep?
Well, we don't know the full answer, but I should say that the FDA approval is to treat fibromyalgia. So on our approved package insert, the indication is that it improves fibromyalgia, or treats fibromyalgia. And fibromyalgia, as you know, is recognized as a chronic pain condition.
That's
So
right.
the primary endpoints of our studies have been to reduce pain. So the only thing that's on our label is the improvement in pain, but we have published two peer-reviewed articles describing the two phase 3 studies, and they're both available online. And a doctor can look at those studies and make their own conclusions about whether we have a benefit of sleep. But the drug was certainly designed to target non-restorative sleep. It's taken at bedtime,
Hmm.
and it was conceived of because of Dr. Moldavsky's hypothesis. But what we've shown is a decrease in pain. So far, the FDA doesn't have a validated endpoint for the improvement in the type of sleep problem that fibromyalgia patients suffer from, which is called non-restorative sleep. And non-restorative sleep is really measured more by how someone feels the next day, as opposed
Hard to
to
measure,
what
right?
sleep is like when they're experiencing it.
Yeah.
So there's actually not great agreement on for example, sleep brain waves measured in what's called a sleep EEG, or polysomnography, between patient-reported outcomes. So, for example, in our studies, we assessed sleep quality using something called the PROMIS sleep disturbance scale. And PROMIS it's like the word promise, but no E at the end. So PROMIS. And that was a scale invented by NIH and is now owned by a nonprofit foundation. But that's called a PRO, reported. While it may be informative, it's not recognized by FDA as a validated endpoint. So it'll take time to either convince FDA about the validity of this or do more research and link it to, for example, EEG.
Right, right. Okay. All right. So then what you were measuring in outcomes was pain, correct?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. And what
And
kind
the
of
the pain, I'm sorry, you keep going.
I think we're having a little bit of an internet glitch. We'll just pause for a second so the editor can edit that out. Um,
Okay. Am I back?
yes, yes, you're much
Okay,
better
sorry
now.
about that.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
So I will just ask that question again. So the outcome you were measuring was pain then, correct?
Yes, we used the same outcome measure pretty much that was used by Pfizer for the approval of Lyrica, by Lilly for the approval of Cymbalta, and by Forest Labs and Cypress in the approval of Savella. So what it's called is daily pain, but it's basically measured. It's a look back. How is your pain preceding 24 hours, and kept in a diary and averaged over each week.
Great, great. And what kind of improvement did you see in your studies?
Well, the improvement, it's hard to describe the improvement because each study has to be taken on their own, because the placebo response and the drug response vary between studies. And another thing that's happened between the approval of Savella, which was the last one, and ours, is that the FDA has begun requiring a more rigorous statistical analysis that takes into account what's called missing data. So, for example, in the new analyses that we had to do, and we're the only ones who had to do this, if someone drops out because of a side effect, then that really penalizes our data, our treatment effect. So it's hard to compare them, apples to apples. First of all, you can't compare two trials, and then you can't compare certainly the first three approvals with ours because, in a sense, FDA moved the goalposts.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I agree with them moving the goalposts, but the numbers don't add up. So, for example, um, in in these studies by Pfizer, Lilly, and Forest, the differences range from something like 0.7 to even 2-point improvement. Whereas in our studies, they looked, on average, something like a 0.5-point improvement. But if you look at how our data would have been treated in the old methods, they're we think comparable to, as good or better than the previous improvements in pain. Um, but I think that the whole system is better, and it raises, no one's going back to look, but I think there's a real question about whether the existing drugs would be approved today on the data they submitted. Now, they have, benefits that are known and risks that are known. So I imagine that if the new hurdles were there today, Pfizer, Lilly, and Forest would have just done larger studies,
That's right.
but
Yep.
this is a more modern system.
Yes, yes. And it sounds like it's for our best as patients too. So,
Yeah, I think, but that's why in the package insert, for example, there's more information that's illustrative, beyond just the change in the point scale. And for example, there are graphs showing, the effective drug versus placebo over the full 14 weeks of the study, and also the responder analyses. And many people think that many experts believe that the responder analyses are important, and many people link that to 30% improvement. How many people experienced a 30% or better improvement? So those are shown on the package insert.
got it. Got it. For those of us who read it.
There's a lot of information there. We spent a lot of
Yeah.
time working on it, and the agency reviews it very carefully.
Yes, yes, I bet, I bet. So, what were some of the challenges that you faced developing Tonmya and getting the approval?
Well, one of the challenges is that fibromyalgia is very hard to study. So, because of the difficulty of studying pain, where pain is invisible, it's subjective. So the only way you know how much pain that someone is in is by their report. We went into it knowing that it would be challenging because of things like the placebo response. Now, there's a placebo response for all drugs, even drugs with very objective findings, but the placebo response in pain studies is higher than in other, indications with more objective findings. So we knew it was going to be difficult, and yet we were motivated because it's so important. But I do think that that's one of the things that scares other companies from developing drugs for fibromyalgia. So each one of our studies cost more than $12 million and, took about, an average about 2 years to start, enroll, complete, and report. So it's a very long process. In the 15 years that have been operating tonics and developing this drug, we've raised and mostly spent, more than $900 million.
Mm.
And so it's a capital intensive and very risky undertaking.
Right, because you
So
have no, guarantee that you're going to be approved at the end, right?
correct. You have no guarantee. But this is the way our drug development system is set up now, where small innovative companies take on all the risk of the drug development process. And it's much more common for bigger companies to, buy smaller companies, for example, after not only the drug is approved, but also uh, the commercial uptake has been, call it, de-risked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So earlier you mentioned that Tonmya is based off of cyclobenzaprine, and a lot of people might recognize that as Flexeril, which is one of the things that often can be prescribed for fibromyalgia. And I know I've gotten comments from people, well, isn't that just the same thing? And I know from our previous conversation it is not. So, why don't we talk about that again? Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people are really curious about is how is this different, especially different from Flexeril?
I'm glad you asked. And I think from our previous discussion, I could go on for quite a while on this. But I think the key point is that Flexeril was studied in a large, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, and it didn't work. So this is a study. It was a 6-month long study. The sponsor was Merck, and it was published in 1994. And the first author is Carette, Carette. And it had a transient benefit. So it had a benefit at 1 month, but then it didn't have any benefit over placebo at months 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So since fibromyalgia is a chronic condition, a 1 month benefit is not meaningful. So Merck looked at that data and decided to abandon the project. It didn't work. I looked at that data and thought, maybe the glass is half full. How can we take this effect that's present at 1 month and figure out a way to give a more durable effect? And that's what we did. And that's what's taken 15 years and all this time and effort. So what the traditional Flexeril is a swallowed tablet. Now, when you swallow something, it goes into your stomach and basically doesn't get into the, has to pass through the liver to get into your bloodstream. And the liver transforms about half of Flexeril into something else before it even gets into your bloodstream. So what we realized, this is a lot of chemistry, a lot of pharmaceutical science, a lot of things went into this. What we realized was that that main metabolite, the thing that cyclobenzaprine is transformed into, interferes with the benefit for fibromyalgia, not for muscle spasm. Because remember, Flexeril is not approved for fibromyalgia, it's approved for muscle spasm, not fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is not muscle spasm. So what we did was we made a tablet that is put under the tongue and it gets into the bloodstream. It gets cyclobenzaprine into the bloodstream directly without going through the liver. And this is called transmucosal absorption, meaning it goes right across the mucosal surface. So by doing that, we decreased the amount of that metabolite that interferes with the effect. And that's why we believe that our clinical data, speak to the fact that our design objectives were achieved. We took something that had a 1 month benefit that was then lost and made a new product that has a durable 3 month effect. And that's why the data we presented to FDA and the product that was approved. So cyclobenzaprine is an oral product, doesn't work. The other thing about it is that it is not approved for long-term usage. It's only approved for 2 to 3 weeks. The dosage of cyclobenzaprine is quite a bit higher. And also the side effects of swallowed side effect of cyclobenzaprine seem higher. Now, I have to say, we haven't done a head-to-head comparison, but if you look at the experience of people with swallowing cyclobenzaprine, there's a lot of dry mouth and drowsiness. And, we really didn't see dry mouth in our studies. And somnolence was reported by 4% of people on Tonmya and 2% of people on placebo. So we think that is a relatively low level. Again, we did not do comparative studies. But I think the main take home is, without head-to-head data, swallowed Flexeril didn't work. Project was killed. It's not indicated for fibromyalgia. It's not indicated for long-term use. So we've now made a very different tablet that releases cyclobenzaprine directly into the bloodstream across the mucosal membrane, and we have durable pain reduction at 3 months.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I know, the clients that I work with, one of the things I hear most often about Flexeril is the drowsiness, right? They just feel like they can't wake up. They're just foggy, brain fog, all of that. And taking that piece out of it, even if nothing else changed, that would be worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, we didn't have brain fog as a specific endpoint in our trial, but there was in the fibromyalgia impact questionnaire, which again, if you go to our articles, you can see we had activity there, but again, not part of our label. But there is a question about memory, and at least on that one question, again, uncorrected for all the other things we're looking at. So, but it seemed to be a trend in the right direction, not in the wrong direction.
Right, right. And I think just taking out that sleepiness also helps with brain fog, right? Because you can't think when you're tired.
Yeah, sleep is a very important time for consolidating memories. And
Yeah.
short-term memories become long-term memories during sleep. There's a lot of things that happen in sleep that we don't understand, but that are very important to certainly decreasing pain and improving memory.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how fast would someone begin to see improvements when they start taking Tonmya?
So on the package insert, it shows the full curves of when people get a benefit. But the only thing that's statistically supported by our data is the week 14 benefit. But if you look at the graphs in of the two studies and the separation from placebo, there was a uncorrected uh, uh, statistical improvement uh, at the first time point, so 2 weeks. So again, that's not a claim, but it certainly wouldn't be unreasonable to expect a benefit at 2 weeks or so. But it doesn't. It's again, it's a Tonmya is a non-opioid analgesic, so it treats pain, but because it works through this somewhat indirect route, it's not going to work right away. So I would think that 2 weeks or so is a reasonable time to find out whether it works for any individual person. But I think, as you know, speaking to someone who knows more about fibromyalgia than I do, fibromyalgia has a waxing and waning,
Yes, it does.
course. So, even if someone didn't have a benefit at 2 weeks, I would, hope that they would, if the tolerability was okay, I would hope that they would, try it longer because, the data really there's a benefit at 14 weeks. But and I think that when fibromyalgia patients are enrolled in a study, they come in at a range of different, uh, call it activities, they're individual activities. So I think it's hard to predict how an individual might benefit.
That's right. That's right. How severe our symptoms are, how we live our lives, what other conditions we have. Like there's a lot there. So, what I'm taking away from that, thinking about working with my clients and telling them about this, is that we probably want to give it that 14 weeks before we give up.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I should say that that like all prescription drugs, there are side effects. I mentioned somnolence is the most common, 4% versus 2%. And another is fatigue, which actually somnolence is 6% versus 2%. Fatigue was 4% on drug versus 2%. And then there were a number of more common side effects that were related to the oral the delivery by the sublingual delivery. So there are things like numbness under the tongue, bad taste, this kind of thing. And that was experienced by, a significant proportion, more than a quarter of the patients experienced it. But those people experience it. In order to wind up on that list, you just have to have had, one of these side effects once over 14 weeks. So 14 weeks is 98 nights. So, for many people, that was, one or two or, a few times. So I do think on balance, I think it was well tolerated and, well, it was approved. So I suppose the FDA agreed that
They
the
agreed.
potential benefit outweighed the side effects, but every drug has side effects.
That's
And
right. And those that you were talking about related to the delivery of the medication, right? A little bit of numbness or bad taste. That sounds to me like, when I give myself my monthly migraine injection, it hurts, right?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
just part of the delivery of the medication. It's not really anything that you're going to worry about, right?
Yeah, well, that's a very good analogy. Injections hurt, but yeah, but all side effects should be taken seriously, and obviously, if someone has side effects, they should stop. But yeah, we're optimistic, and there are a couple of other things about taking it with other medicines that doctors would caution about. And also, there's a pregnancy warning that if people are trying to become pregnant, they should stop. If doctors starting a new patient should, who um, uh, is, of reproductive age, et cetera, they should not use Tonmya at that point, et cetera. And it's so is pregnancy and for the first trimester.
Yeah. And from what I understand, most medications will have something like that, largely because we're not going to be testing medications on pregnant ladies, right? Isn't that
That's
part of it?
correct. That's correct. But one of the advantages of Tonmya is that because of this connection with the existing products, Flexeril, for example, has been used for so many years, is that there's, I hope, some more confidence in its overall safety and tolerability than something that had never been, tested. We've had, probably 1,000 or so patients in our trials for a period of time, but there are millions of patients who have taken cyclobenzaprine, so as Flexeril. So hopefully that experience uh, is out there in such a way that if there are other concerns, they would pop up on the way that FDA, watches the safety of products.
Right, right. It definitely gives a level of confidence, for big bad things happening, right? Because it's a medication that's been around forever. Yeah. Yeah. I
Correct.
like that. I like that. So the big question, when can we get this?
We are rushing. We're doing everything we can to get it on the shelves as soon as possible. And right now we're guiding for the fourth quarter of this year. So
Ooh,
should be
that's
soon.
close.
Thank you. Yes, it is. We have to print labels, put in boxes, do all these kind of things and then get it, in shipped around. So it's all available all at the same time. Because once we launch it, we don't want anyone to be disappointed that they can't get it. So we are working very hard to get it out there.
Yes, that's exciting. So, for the person listening who is thinking, I want that, what should their steps be on a practical level? Obviously, talk to their doctor, but if their doctor isn't familiar with Tonmya, what should we do to pursue this if we want to use it?
Yeah, so we are now, I'm at Pain Week, the conference in Las Vegas right now, talking to prescribers. Our company is talking to prescribers. And so I think, we're trying to get the word out there, but it would be very helpful if patients told their prescribers about it and their healthcare professionals and they would, we're going to be reaching out to a lot of healthcare providers and they could find us on the web and contact us in a variety of ways. The product website, tonmya.com, is up. So, we are happy to speak to anyone who wants to speak to us about the availability of it.
That's awesome. That is so great. I'm so glad you guys are doing it that fast. That was one of the things that a lot of people were asking me. I'm like, oh, I don't know. These things take time. So,
They do, and believe me, we wish it was tomorrow, but it's
yeah.
it's not. It's a big undertaking. But once we get it out there, then we'll do everything we can to make sure there's a steady supply of it.
That's excellent. Excellent. Now, a lot of times when new medications come out, they're not on our insurance formulary, meaning they're not things that insurance will cover, or it'll be at a much higher cost. Do you have any plans for programs or initiatives to help patients with the cost?
Yes, we're working now. We're in, discussions with different insurers, PBMs, all these different people in the chain of that part of the industry. And I don't have any specific announcements, but we're certainly trying to make sure that it's accessible. And there, as you say, there are a lot of different programs that we hope to put in place, and we should make announcements closer to when it's available.
Awesome. And of course, the website will be a great place to find that, right? Tonmya.com.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Is there anything else we need to know about Tonmya that I haven't asked you about?
First of all, thank you very much for speaking with us, for your interest in fibromyalgia. And I just hope that our efforts will energize fibromyalgia patients to be out there talking to their healthcare providers, talking to their congressmen and women, talking to their senators, talking to everyone about, because journalists, I mean, it just seems it's been a long road for many of us, and there's been so much that's been accomplished. And I think we're coming in right now at a relative low, almost the bottom of public awareness and interest in
Yeah.
fibromyalgia, which
Yeah.
is completely out of tune with what's going on in terms of the research community and the rest of it. So I hope that our drug really energizes the community, the patient advocacy groups, and everyone so that fibromyalgia gets discussed more. In our research, we really don't find that there's a stigma about it. And I think there had been, I mean, having been in the field this long, I remember when that was the case. And, but we don't understand why there's not more of a dialogue about it. There used to be champions of fibromyalgia. In the New York Times, Jane Brody used to write about fibromyalgia, and other people, other reporters and whatnot. So I certainly hope that the public awareness of fibromyalgia catches up with what's going on in the science. And I also hope that other companies are mobilized by what we're doing to develop even more medicines. I mean, I don't think ours is, the last, but it's certainly an important step forward because Cymbalta and Savella have the same mechanism. They're both SNRIs, and Lyrica, is a gabapentinoid, and ours is, we call it a tertiary amine tricyclic. It's a first-in-class medicine. So I think that this, really has potential to offer people something completely different than what they're used to, and hopefully there'll be more of a call to action, a reason to be diagnosed and treated.
Yes, I agree with that so much. I'm hoping that this, gets people talking more about fibromyalgia. It's amazing. I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but it's amazing to me, doing what I do in this industry, nobody is talking about fibromyalgia.
Well, I was happy to see about a month ago, the National Academies of Sciences published a report on long Lyme, or chronic Lyme disease.
Yes.
And in it, there was a boxed section that spoke to how fibromyalgia was really a paradigm for how to develop new medicines in complicated conditions. The overlap between these two conditions. So I hope we can all learn from fibromyalgia, not squander the lessons and the energy and the achievements that have gone into it, including now the FDA approval of 4 products with the
Yeah,
indication of fibromyalgia.
that's right. That's right. So what's next?
What's next? We have to, as I said,
You
we have
take
to
a
get
deep
this.
breath, right?
Yeah, yeah, we have to get this into bottles and packages and trucks and get it all over the country and make sure it's available to people. That's what, and getting the word out. So and this is our first conference where Tonmya is approved. So we're speaking to prescribers and really getting the word out. But we would welcome, all the, if patients and advocacy groups, whatnot, could also support us because um, it's really important for people to be involved in generating the excitement.
That's right. That's right. And y'all can share this episode too. This is a great way to, get people some information. So what is the best way for people to stay up to date on what's happening when things are available, when those programs might be available?
I think the Tonmya website is probably the best place.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your conference and everything to do this interview. We really appreciate it. And thank you for all the decades that you have been working to help our community. Speaking on behalf of the community, thank you.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for your nice words. Well,
E- Excellent, excellent. Well, for you listening, stay tuned. I have a few announcements for you, but that wraps up our interview. Thank you so much.
thank you.
And that wraps up my conversation with Dr. Seth Lederman, CEO of Tonix Pharmaceuticals, makers of Tonmya, the new FDA-approved medication for fibromyalgia. You'll find all the links and show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/168. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do want to share a conversation I had with Dr. Lederman after we stopped recording. One of the criticisms that I've heard about Tonmya is that the first studies on the medication, quote, didn't work. I think it's important to bring some clarity to this. You may remember during the interview hearing Dr. Lederman share that they first tried Tonmya at a lower dose. When that didn't give the results they hoped for, they did further studies at a higher dose. The results people are criticizing are from those first studies at that lower dose. And it's important to understand that this isn't saying the medication doesn't work. It's just the basic scientific method. You have a hypothesis, you test it, you collect the data, then you evaluate and start over by testing your new hypothesis. By testing at the lower dose, Tonix learned that the dose of Tonmya for fibromyalgia just needs to be higher. And additional studies at that higher dose showed their hypothesis to be correct. This higher dose is what has been approved by the FDA for fibromyalgia. It's also important to point out that some of the testing for Tonmya happened during the pandemic, which means study results were likely skewed during that time as a result. Patients were under greater stress, may have had trouble continuing in the study, and dropped out for reasons completely unrelated to the medication. You remember what it was like in 2020? All in all, I am very excited about Tonmya and how it can help our community. I plan on sharing this with all my clients and with my own providers. So if you get the opportunity to try it, remember to give it at least 14 weeks, like we discussed in the interview. That's how long it takes to see the full result and truly find out if this will work for you. And please let me know if you try it. I would love to hear about your experience. And remember, you can find the link to Tonmya's website and all the other information at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/168. Now, before we wrap up, I want to remind you that our next Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class begins next week on September 16th. If you've been interested in helping others with their fibromyalgia, finding a new fibro-friendly career, or just simply finding new ways to feel better, check out our classes. Graduates of our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class improve their fibromyalgia symptoms an average of 50% in just 90 days. Our certified fibromyalgia coaches are often nearly symptom-free when they graduate. This is absolutely the best way I know to feel better and to change the lives of others with fibromyalgia. If you want more information, especially about those results, be sure and check out our extra information at bafibrocoach.com. That's the word B-E, fibrocoach.com. That includes our bonus Be a Coach podcast series, which is right here in your podcast app, and other information. The lecture portion of our classes, the classes with me, are only actually offered twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. So this is your last opportunity for 2025. Portions of our class do start more frequently than that, but the lecture portion with me only happens twice a year. So enroll now. And now I have this week's listener shout out for you. This comes from Carrie, who reached out to me after our virtual open house. She says, I am very interested in the coaching program. Working with my coach was the only thing that helped me until I got my new doctor. I just wanted you to know that's why I want to be a coach. Working with Anne changed my life so much for the better. I want to pay it forward. Thank you so much for your kind words there, Carrie, and I have forwarded them on to Anne. She is talking about her work with certified fibromyalgia coach Anne Garner. So if you want to pay it forward, consider joining our next class. And if you're looking for someone to help you when nothing else is, consider working with one of our certified fibromyalgia coaches or student coaches in training. Anne is even one of the coaches that you can meet with. To schedule your no obligation consultation, just visit findafibrocoach.com or visit today's show notes for all the links. Fibromyalgiapodcast.com/168. See you back here next time.